after chopping it up with Beeker, I'm still on the fence a little bit about getting another tire shop. You know, it was great when me and Lil Kirk had it. That was one of our first businesses that we tried together, outside of the real estate, of course. And it was a cash cow. I mean, I really loved it. However, I'm now at a place where I don't really need money like that. And I don't know if it sits well with me because I can't really employ so many people at the tire business. Although I can give some people an opportunity, I don't really have to. You know, it doesn't do anything for me to be out there. Unlike my farm, I got a farm out here across the street from Beeker's. That's the main reason I even come out here, and to let him work on my stuff. He's a great mechanic. But I come out here to kind of meditate and just get away from everything. I love nature. It is everything to me. It basically renews me. And I also get an opportunity to help other people out. I'm in a place in my life where I don't need money. And I'm just overflowing with abundance. I have so much more than I would ever need. So I passed on that gift and give these people an opportunity for employment in a very beautiful place that they can upkeep, maintain. They can live off the land themselves as well. I come out here and get my fresh produce, stuff like that. The farmers in the area, if they need some help or anything, they can always count on me because it's not something that I need. I'm providing for all these people an opportunity, and that really feels good to me. So when I'm out here, they know I'm just out here vibing out as usual. I throw on my headphones and I listen to something inspirational, educational, something of that nature. And today I'm listening to Jordan Peterson. I really vibe with almost everything that he says. Some things I don't quite get along with, but most things I'm very connected to him, and I always learn something when I listen to him. Even the same things that he talk about. If it could be the same speech, I hear it a second time in a different way, and I learn something.
Well, is there something wrong with generating money? It's like, well, it depends on what you're going to do with the money. Like if you're going to spend it all on hookers and cocaine, then probably that's reprehensible.
The interview.
Yeah, no problem.
It's funny, I'd planned all these questions, and then we've just had a chat before rolling about, your interest in entrepreneurship. And maybe that could be the angle we could use on the podcast, because maybe it's not what you've talked about on a lot of other podcasts. So I might just shut the laptop and we might go down there, if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
How does psychology, temperament, marry up and link with psychology? You're obviously well known for psychology commentary in other areas, but maybe we could focus a bit on that domain.
Well, I mean, there's lots known about what predicts success in different domains across the lifespan, let's say. The first question is, if you're trying to analyze something like business success or productive success, what are the proper domains of category? And so if you're trying to categorize jobs, for example, which turns out to be quite difficult, the simplest conceptual scheme that's practical, that gets you somewhere, is like a 2x2 matrix. There are simple jobs and complex jobs. That's the first thing that's worth knowing. And it's a continuum, really. But a simple job is one where once you're trained, you just repeat what you're doing. So factory line work would be an example of that, or checking out people at a grocery store, or restocking grocery shelves, or jobs like that. The best predictors for success in those jobs is conscientiousness, trait conscientiousness. And conscientious people are orderly and industrious. And we don't exactly know why they are. It seems like it's associated, oddly enough, with such things as disgust sensitivity. So maybe people are conscientious because they get disgusted with themselves if they're not useful. Guilty. They get guilty if they're not engaging in productive enterprise. And maybe that's a marker for a kind of complex social responsibility. But
which sounds like the complete opposite of most entrepreneurs I know.
Well, that's the thing. The entrepreneurs are different. So for simple jobs, IQ, intelligence, predicts how fast you learn the job, but not how well you do it once you learn it. And what predicts there is conscientiousness. So you basically, if you're hiring people, you want conscientious people who are. That's the most important thing. And then the second most important thing is you want people who are relatively low in trait neuroticism, which is a negative emotion dimension, because they're less likely to be absentee, and so forth. So in complex job is one where the demands change on a regular basis. And so most managerial and administrative positions are complex jobs because you can't learn the job once and for all. And then the best predictor for complex jobs, the first predictor is IQ. And the second predictor is conscientiousness. And IQ is about 3 times more powerful than conscientiousness as a predictor. And then, so that's the first, simple versus complex. And then the second category scheme would be something like managerial / administrative versus entrepreneurial. And the entrepreneurial types, actually, they're over with the artists. So the best predictor for entrepreneurial success, first is IQ, but second is trait openness, which is the creativity dimension. So entrepreneurial types tend to be very high in trait openness. And so that sets them with the artists and also with the political liberals, because the best predictor of political liberalism is trait openness.
Right.
So the managers and administrative types, they tend to be conservative. And the entrepreneurial and creative types tend to be liberal. And so if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to be a lateral thinker. And so you'll be the sort of person, if you hear an idea, that will trigger off a whole bunch of other ideas. And you'll be motivated primarily by interest in pursuing your ideas. But your downfall is likely to be organizational administrative ability. So it's often useful for entrepreneurial types to pair themselves with managerial and administrative types.
Yeah, it's like you are describing my soul here.
Yeah, well, there's a tension. There's this weird tension between doing one thing right, which is what you need to do if you've already decided what it is that you're doing, and scanning the landscape for something new to do that would be worthwhile. Those aren't the same enterprises. And so most companies are an uneasy marriage of entrepreneurial and managerial types. As the company gets more and more established, the managerial and administrative types tend to dominate. But then that becomes problematic because it means it's more and more difficult for the company to shift laterally when it has to, which is, again, I think why so many companies eventually fail.
Because they lose the creative head, is that what you mean?
Sure, they lose the flexibility.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they're trying to maximize their ability to implement, but it's very difficult to do that without also simultaneously bearing the cost of narrowing. Right?
Yeah.
So the thing is if you know what you're doing, you want to hire a conservative. If you don't know what you're doing, you want to hire a liberal. Right. So that's a way of thinking about it temperamentally. It's also a way of parsing out the political landscape to understand, at least in part, why you need conservatives and liberals.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I find a business is like a family. And in the past, in my company, I've had all under 25-year-old male entrepreneurs. Why did we hire them? Because that's what we were like.
Right.
And I've found entrepreneurs tend to hire versions of themselves at first, instead of being more self-aware to go, actually, I'm chaotic, disruptive. What I need is order and, like you said, good administrative skills, conscientiousness. So you go through that chaos, of hiring people too much like you and having like too much male energy or too much creative energy, then you maybe react and hire a lot of administration and conscientiousness, and then you maybe lose the soul in your company. And then the creative's trying to drag the company forward. Feels like he's getting held back by everybody.
Well, and it is. It is. But the funny
it's needed to hold him back, but they've got to let him go as well, or her, haven't they?
Well, that's the problem. The fundamental problem is most new ideas are stupid, dangerous, and counterproductive.
And they're the ones that change the world.
well, they are sometimes. They are sometimes, but there's a subset of new ideas that, even though new ideas are dangerous and disruptive and often counterproductive and generally don't result in a productive company, some of them are absolutely necessary, and they're the thing you need to do next. And so, and that's a very difficult problem to solve, because it's the fundamental problem of innovation. It's like most innovations aren't justified or warranted, but some of them are absolutely crucial. So how do you distinguish between them? And the answer is, well, we don't know. The part of the way that you do that in a dynamic economy is you let and encourage a whole host of entrepreneurs to produce their ideas, and you let almost all of them fail. It's kind of painful for the entrepreneurs.
But limited company and all those kind of structures are set up to make that more safe, aren't they?
Right. Yeah. Well, this is something that's massively underappreciated.
It is.
I would say, on the liberal left end of the political spectrum, is people just don't understand how absolutely revolutionary the idea of a limited company is. Because what a limited company allows is, a limited company allows your idea to die instead of you. And that's a big deal.
Otherwise no one would take the risk, would they, of creating anything?
Well, that's right. No one could bear the risk. Because if you failed, it would wipe you out permanently. It's like, well, who the hell's going to take that risk? And so the fact that the limited liability is one of the unbelievable tech. I can't believe that
that's like an innovation that we all just forget about, isn't it?
And it's such a merciful innovation. It's like, you mean I get to fail and no one's going to kill me? No one's going to throw me in debtor's prison. It's not going to hang around my neck for the rest of my life. I can actually take a risk. So because the other thing you see often with entrepreneurs is that they fail a lot before they succeed. And so, I mean, you have to be pretty damn spectacularly lucky to have your first idea, when you don't know what the hell you're doing, be a spectacular success.
Or maybe it's a good idea, but you weren't ready, and you're more ready.
Or the marketplace isn't ready. Or, I mean, that's the other thing that people don't really understand, is because if you're a naive entrepreneur, you think, well, all I have to do is make a great product. It's like, no, that's about 5% of it. You know, and that shocked the hell out of me when I started building software, for example, because we assumed that we developed software to help people select better employees, and we never could sell it except in very rare circumstances. But we assumed that if we had a product that was validated, we could show that it had the effects that we wanted, and that it was more efficient than other products in the marketplace, that selling it would be easy. It's like, well, that's just so wrong. Selling and marketing things is impossible.
I love it when people say, oh, the product just sells itself. It's just one of those things which are like, you've not been in business a very long time. Because you've got market forces, you've got your skill set. You could have a great product. You're just not ready to sell it because you haven't got enough experience.
Well, and you don't know how to price it. And you don't know who to talk to sell it. You know, you can spend your whole life, especially if you're selling to companies, which is virtually impossible, talking to the wrong people. And it feels like work, and it really is work, but you never end up contacting a real decision maker. And then you can't tolerate the excessive delay. Like you think, well, I'm going to go sell this product to a big company because they can obviously provide me with a massive contract. It's like, yeah, but there's a relationship between the size of the company and the delay in implementation, and the delay can be years. And then this happened to us all the time. It was very painful. We'd get right to the point of signing with a large company, and there'd be an internal management transformation, and the person that we were dealing with would disappear. It's like, oh no, it's like, now what? We actually had that happen with a really big company in New York. We were right on the verge of signing a contract for use of this self-authoring program that we designed, which helps people plan their lives. And the week that we were ready to sign the contract, the CEO resigned. So gone. Was probably a year of sales and marketing work just evaporate.
Yeah.
You know,
and you don't get paid for any of that. You get no reward for getting 364 days down to 365 days.
You certainly don't. Well, and it's also really easy for one of the things that tech incubators do really badly, I think, is they do lots of things really badly, generally speaking. But one of the things they do that's very counterproductive with the people that they train is they emphasize the development of the company, but they don't force their entrepreneurs to find customers, because your first customer is the most difficult thing you'll ever do as a business person, in my experience, to find someone who will actually pay you that first time.
That isn't your mum.
Yeah, but that's right. Well, that's right. That isn't a family member. That's an actual customer.
Yeah.
And the other problem that people face when they're trying to sell a new product is one of the ways that people decide whether they're going to buy something is whether or not A, they know anyone else who's already bought it, or B, if there's other people in their domain that are already using it. And if your sales pitch is, well, no, this is new and revolutionary, you think, well, that's a wonderful sales pitch. It is like it is if you're talking to someone who's entrepreneurial and risk-taking and interested in revolutionary ideas. But if you're talking to a middle manager in a company, the last thing that person wants to hear is, well, you could be a risk taker and introduce this into your company. The person's thinking, I don't want to put my job or reputation on the line for your product, even if it is revolutionary, in part because if it succeeds, I probably won't be rewarded for its success. So when we were selling our employee selection software, for example, we were academics, and so, you know, there was lots of things we didn't know about business. And one of the things we ran into, which was so funny, we talked to the people who were doing the hiring, and they had a certain budget, which was usually lower than, because they had virtually no budget for hiring, weirdly enough. So what we were charging for the product, which was still extremely modest, exceeded their budget. We said, well, look, you're going to make a 250-fold return on this. Pessimistically, it's 50. Realistically, it's 250, and the upper end was more like 500. So it's a no-brainer to implement this. It's like, well, we're budgeted on the cost side. What do you mean? Well, if we hire more productive employees, we won't be rewarded for that. We'll just be punished for spending more money at the outset. I thought, well, we can't even talk to you because I'm trying to sell you something that will benefit your company, but for you, as the decision maker, there's nothing but risk in implementing the new process. So that just blew me away. It's like, oh, I see. The hiring budget and the productivity budget aren't associated. So that's like a fatal impediment to our sales process. So that was, well, we learned lots of things about, and I came out of the whole enterprise with way more respect for people, especially for people who do sales. Jesus, that's such a brutal job. And, you know, when people they have it's easy for people to, it's even a popular trope to be somewhat contemptuous of salespeople, you know, all those salespeople.
Definitely in Britain. We're very reserved when it comes to selling in Britain. I mean, I don't put ads on my podcast. I mean, there's ads on virtually every American podcast. I don't put ads. I don't need the revenue, so in a way, there's the old creative artist side of me that doesn't want to interrupt my work with ads. But, like, if I start putting ads on my podcast, you know, some people will be okay with it. There'd be a bit of a riot.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a real mistake because we're not giving the devil his due. It's really, really hard to be a good salesperson. And people like that are unbelievably rare, and they're unbelievably valuable.
And nothing wrong with it, and it doesn't make you a bad person. You're not selling your soul.
But it's also how are you going to generate revenue? And without that,
how's economy going to money even going to move in an economy?
Well, the other thing that happens with the artistic and maybe the entrepreneurial types too is that they end up with contempt for the business end of the process, and that's a real mistake. You know, I mean, one of the things that I tell people who are artistically oriented, let's say, so they're in the entrepreneurial category, is, look, it's virtually impossible for you to monetize your product. That's the first thing you have to understand. So maybe you'll get lucky and you'll figure out a strategy. But if you add contempt for the sales and marketing process to that impossibility, you can be bloody well sure that all you're going to do is starve. So you better drop your contempt for the sales and marketing end of this if you want to sustain yourself through your life. And that's going to be a prerequisite for your creative endeavor.
Yeah.
And art schools and establishments like that do an absolutely dreadful job of...
Well, they don't teach it.
No,
I was
not
an
at all.
artist. I was an artist. I went through art school.
Yeah.
They don't teach it.
No.
Never once.
No, I know. And it's and I mean...
How are you going to commercialise your venture? How are you going to pay for your mortgage? What, just...
How are you going to buy food?
Yeah, with just a paintbrush and a canvas.
Oh, Jesus. And artists are in particularly dire position because as a visual artist, for example, you're not only competing with all the visual artists that now exist, and there's plenty of them, but you're also competing with all the dead artists who already have an established reputation and a body of work that's being still being exchanged in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to add contempt for the sales and marketing process to that. And you also probably have to understand that if you want to be an artist, that you're also going to have to have another job.
Yeah.
Because it's just, unless you want to bang your head against the wall until it's bleeding, it's so hard. And I mean, I've known some people who are outstanding artists, and I've known very, very few. I don't know if I've ever met anyone who was able to make a living from the outset of their career as a non-commercial visual artist. Brutally difficult. Yeah. So, and adding contempt to that is not helpful. You should be very thankful that sales and marketing people exist. Even I know there's that, what would you call it, the mercantilist commercial element to it that is sort of, in some sense, you can consider it distasteful from the perspective of higher aesthetics, but don't confuse your ignorance of something important, sales and marketing, with your moral purity. That's a big mistake. It's a big ethical mistake, and you will pay for that.
Yeah.
So
I think there's some simple solutions. I almost want to sort of summarise this part so far. I've always enjoyed selling straight to consumer and not to businesses.
Yeah, I like that better too.
I think that you've got more customers. You're always at the decision maker. Sometimes it's the husband or the wife who owns the credit card strings, but other than that, you're always at the decision maker. You learn very intuitively and quickly. You get a quick feedback loop.
Yeah.
Whereas, like you said, if you're dealing with a manager who's got their own motives, and then a company who's got different motives, they're not going to tell you the truth. You've got to unwrap all of that.
They don't even know what the truth is necessarily, because they can't represent their business because they don't embody it.
Yeah. So straight to consumer is number one. I think the second thing is, I think probably it is fair to say that sales and marketing can be learned, but I think it's also fair to say that sales and marketing are more likely to succeed in certain personality traits.
Yeah. Well, you need to be extroverted, for example.
Yeah.
So and assertive.
Yeah.
And it also helps to be emotionally stable, because what's your failure rate as a salesperson?
Oh,
it's like 50 to 1. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like you have to have a constitution of bloody iron to tolerate that. Because what's the default answer to do you want to buy something from me? No. No, it's no. Go away, right? It's worse than no.
Yeah.
It's like, no, and you're bothering me.
Yeah.
And then even if the best you get is, well...
That's worse, by the way. That's worse than no, I'll think about it, the middle ground.
Yeah, well,
at least with a no, you can move on.
That's right, you drown in... That's right. Well, that's the problem with trying to sell to big companies.
Yeah.
It's like,
it's never a no.
Maybe we'll do this. It's like, when? Well, maybe in the next 6 months to a year, which will be delayed. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, we found selling direct to consumer way less stressful.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is...
And more rewarding, sorry to jump in.
More rewarding.
More rewarding, because you can actually change an individual's life.
Yes.
With a good product.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, the thing about, you kind of have this idea that you could, let's go for a big company, a couple of contracts and we're set. It's like, but you'll die in the interim waiting for the contracts.
Yeah.
So, and it is so interesting to think about that in terms of the error of Marxist criticisms of capitalism, because the Marxist criticism was something like, capital will accrue in the hands of a smaller and smaller number of individuals, which it does, but the individuals rotate. That's the thing that Marx got wrong.
Right.
Now, with big companies, you think that, the big companies absorb all the capital, but the thing is they fail.
Yeah.
The reason they fail is because they get so large, they're so ponderous, that they move so slowly that eventually they make themselves extinct. And you experience that when you're trying to sell to them. It's like, you have this rule. Oh, you have this rule. Oh, you also have this rule. Well, this rule means we have to completely rewrite our software.
Yeah.
You know, and then well, and these special adaptations have to be made. And there's 20 people to clear that with. And yeah, it's brutally difficult.
Right, so this Marxist capitalism thing, that was one of the initial things I wanted to talk about. And I want to come to that in a minute.
Yep.
I'm bursting now with questions, and I know you've got to go at 12. So, okay, so the next summary then is something that worked for me and my business partner. Because I don't like the word self-made, because I don't think anyone's self-made. I think you need people around you. But self-made in the sense that we weren't given money to start, and we didn't have family money.
That's hard.
And I think the gift in the business we've grown is I have a business partner who's very conscientious, very analytical, very sceptical. His answer is always no.
Right,
He's,
yeah.
For
I have a
years,
partner like that too.
right, and then and I'm the opposite, and so that allowed me to go and do the sales and the marketing, and allowed him to clear up my mess, accounts, finance, structure, organisation. So to anyone listening who isn't really a natural sales or marketing person or doesn't want to learn it, partner or align with someone who is. And you probably make a great team.
Well, and it's also really important to understand that these things, they can be learned to some degree, but there are temperamental proclivities. And so if you're open, technically that's a big 5 trait. Your people who are listening, I have a website, understandmyself.com, understandmyself.com. And if you want to know your big 5 profile, it will provide that. And it breaks each of the big 5 into the 2 subcomponents. And so it's very useful so that you can go there and find out what temperamental pattern you have. If you're high in openness, then you're oriented towards entrepreneurial activity. If you're high in conscientiousness, then you're oriented towards managerial activity. If you're high in agreeableness, customer service. Disagreeable people, disagreeable people are they're also good for.
Okay, so since I was thinking about the business, I was listening to Jordan Peterson's, aspect of what he thought about business. Now I'm headed home to get a little rest. Thanks Beeks for the ride.